Hello, welcome to this episode of the Private Aviation Insider's Guide. And today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jordan LaMott, who is just starting to work with some of my favorite people in the industry over at Clay Lacy. Jordan, thanks for agreeing to come on and talk about your aircraft that you're graduating from, the G4, because you're about to start an exciting career flying in the G450, G550 for Clay Lacy. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's just jump right in and talk about the G4, the G4SP. Can you tell me a little bit about the performance of that aircraft and its typical mission?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the G4, G450, basically they're the same exact airplane. The experience I'm going to be talking about most is going to be with the G4, G4SP, because I do go to type school on the G5 next week. But the G450 and 4 are about the exact same when it comes to performance. The performance on the G4 is actually very good. Generally, the aircraft has way more power than you will ever need. So when you're in the high, hot, and heavy environments, it's not really as much of a consideration in comparison to much smaller aircraft. When I came from a Phenom 100, we were constantly having to worry about the runway length and do we have enough power for single engine? Are we going to make it with a mountainous escape route? But this airplane, even on a single engine, we're able to outclimb basically anything unless I'm in Kathmandu or in the middle of Nepal somewhere, then maybe I would have to consider those options.
So tell me about a typical mission in the G4.
Typical mission for us would be obviously showing up to the airplane about 1.5 hours early, making sure that we have obviously the catering, making sure the flight attendant has enough time if she needs any help, making sure we have the clearance taken care of, the performance is all run and done, and the route looks good, that we have the weather that we need to getting into a local area. But generally, a mission for us is going to be on a transcon level. Or potentially crossing to Hawaii from either San Francisco, from one of the coastline cities, but generally like San Francisco or LA or San Diego. But if we're on the East Coast, because the airplane can only go, it's about a 9-hour airplane if we're really lucky. But when we are trying to go from, say, Los Angeles to Paris or London or something along those lines, we definitely can't do the whole thing in one fellow swoop, so we're going to have to stop and do a fuel stop. And usually our preferred choice is to stop in Teterboro, which is the Van Nuys of the West, or the Teterboro of the West, and is the Van Nuys of the East. So it's kind of a fun way to say it, like the two busiest airports that I operate out of for the private jet world. And so it's a lot of transcons, but generally, if we're going to go to Europe and stuff like that, that's what we're doing.
So there's a fallacy that the number of seats in the aircraft is the number of passengers that can travel comfortably in the aircraft. So I always like to bust that myth right up front. How many people comfortably travel in a G4?
So the airplane can handle up to 19 passengers, but that's if it's configured that way. And but 22 people is total occupancy. And so you're talking about a flight attendant, 2 pilots, then you have 19 passengers if it's configured that way. But generally the airplanes that I have flown are configured in the realm of between 12 and 15 seats at most. I have had airplanes that have been fully filled and some, and it doesn't really get so private anymore. So when you are operating in the general world of what we do, we'll have as little as one person. Sometimes we're just ferrying, which is funny, like an animal, because people are so wealthy that they'll pay for us to bring out a puppy from one coast to the other coast, and they'll pick up their puppy instead of having to throw it on an airline. That was one of the weirdest things that has ever happened to me. But yeah, because our flight attendant was having a blast. She was like, "Oh my God, I get to play with a puppy the whole entire time. This is so great." Like she was just loving life. And we were like, okay, it's just a dog in the back, but we didn't have any humans. But generally on average, we'll get people in the realms of like 1 to about maybe 5 or 6 at most. Because like I was saying earlier, that it doesn't become private anymore. It becomes more like an airline. And so navigating the cabin, even as a passenger, let alone being the flight attendant, can become very challenging as people are constantly moving in and around. And they don't have to be seated. There's no real seatbelt mandatoriness other than when I turn it on, but I can't control that. She's not a certified flight attendant to control that. So if I have to leave my station to put people in their seats, it's not really great for business to be able to force somebody who's spending $60,000 to sit in their seat. I recommend it. I tell them they should, but that's the capacity of it.
You have some crazy clients, it sounds like, from time to time.
I've had some fun ones, definitely some notable ones too. So I'm very blessed to be able to have had the opportunity to fly such people.
Well, I might ask you about that a little bit later, just a teaser for what's to come. But let's get back to the actual performance of the aircraft. Talk to me about your climb, the ceiling, the cruise altitude that you like, and how fast you're going.
Okay. So let's see here. Climb performance wise, the airplane has unbelievable amounts of climbability because the engines they're very large for the airframe that it is, and the wing is very dynamic lift, or high lift capability. So with that being said, we're able to generate so much lift with so much power that the average is between 4,000 and 6,000 feet per minute in our climb. You can get up to 10, but you're going to bleed off your speed very quickly, and it's not very comfortable for the passengers. But the realm of around 4,000 feet in a climb for the initial climb is about average 3,000 to 4,000 roughly. But when we're doing, like cruise climbs, you're talking about in the realm of as low as 500 feet all the way up to, if we need to expedite rather quickly, not talking about any emergency event that would come into play, like such as a TCAS or a traffic awareness system, like an RA. But generally, like a cruise climb would be in the realm of like 500 to maybe at most 2,000 feet per minute. The aircraft can climb up to 45,000 feet, but that's the ceiling on this aircraft. And it's only certified for the G4 and G450 that way because the aircraft has to have the ability to get down to a safe enough altitude, or else it could climb up to flight level 510. But due to the certification realm of the aircraft being able to get down to a safe enough altitude, which is flight level 250 in less than 10 minutes, they need to be able to, stop the climb at 45. But in the G5, G550, you can get up to 51,000 feet, which is incredible. You can actually start seeing the curvature of the Earth. And I can't wait until I'm actually doing a summer oceanic crossing, red eye, and I get to be at peak altitude 45 or 51, and I look out and I get to watch the Northern Lights. That's like a dream shot for me, is just seeing that. But getting back to what you were saying about the performance-wise, the aircraft is MMO'd, which is the maximum operating speed of 0.88 Mach. But generally in the range for us to operate on the G4 450 is going to be a cruise range of 8.0. We can do a long range cruise of like 7.8-ish, but you kind of are burning more fuel and you're causing more drag. So the sweet spot is around 8.0 for long range cruise. And then, if the boss wants to go fast and spend a lot more money, we can get up to 8.4, 8.5 at best, but generally like 8.4 is where you would sit. But the amount of minutes you're going to save is really honestly not worth the fuel burn. But if the boss wants us to go fast, we'll bring it up if we can.
Sometimes it's just for fun. Tell me about the fuel burn in the G4. It's a little bit of a gas hog.
I mean, honestly, not as bad as you would think, because if you're comparing to like a G5, 550, you have much larger tanks and newer engines, which is definitely way more fuel efficient, not even compared to like a G650 or G500, 600 series. But it could be a little bit more of a gas hog, but you're talking about the range of 1,300 pounds plus or minus 100 or so when you're up at flight level 450. Obviously, that is dependent a little bit on ISA. If you are positive or negative on the ISA, even though it is coming into the engine, it is compressed and so forth, but still the outside air temperature does make a difference on that. But generally, when you are crossing the United States, I've seen in a realm of 1600 to 1650-ish of what we're burning at. And that's usually because if we're really heavy, we can't climb up to 450 and until like the last 3 hours of the flight, maybe if we're really lucky. So you'll get a much higher fuel burn because obviously being in a lower altitude, you burn more fuel. That's why they have us climb up so high if we can.
Smart thinking. Tell me about the travel time from Van Nuys to Teterboro.
Well, do you want summer times or do you want winter times?
Well, just tell me what we should be expecting either way.
So I have seen as quick as, let's see here. I've seen as quick as 4 hours, 3:57 actually, from Van Nuys to Teterboro, which is pretty incredible. And that's
a big tailwind.
That's a huge tailwind. That was actually back in November, December when that happened. And it was, we're basically here, we're starting our descent, like, oh my gosh. But then obviously on the backside of that return, we were at 6 hours and 35 minutes or so on the way back because we had 130 knot headwind. When you're doing about 290 knots over the ground, it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, that's a big differential. The winds make so much difference in air travel. It's crazy. I want to get into a little bit of how you feel about the cockpit and what it's like from a pilot workload perspective in the G4.
Okay. So the G4 is, in comfort wise of the cockpit, I think because I'm 6'3", the cockpit has a tendency to be a little bit small for me. And because of a lot of the radio racks that are set just behind my seat, as well as a couple sets behind the circuit breaker behind his seat and where the door is placed, there's such big computers from back in the 80s when they designed this airplane that they didn't really have the room and or space. But now in the G450 and so forth, so far on, they've obviously with technology have compressed that. So now when I move into the G450, I'm able to actually fully bring my seat back if I want to. I can even recline it. I can stretch my legs out, which is going to drastically improve my comfortability for sitting long haul, being in the airplane for extended periods of months of time, because I generally have to get up around every 3 hours or so, depending on who I'm flying with or whatever it is, to be able to stretch, get the blood flowing in my legs and make myself feel comfortable. But going into the whole workload aspect of the airplane from one versus the G4 to the G450, I'm not typed in the G450 yet, and I will be here soon, as we discussed earlier. But in the G4, engineers, when they designed the airplane, they made so many checks and balances with a kind of like a CYA for their own self. And so in previous airplanes that I have flown, you would find there would be a realm of about maybe 10 to 15 items on a before start checklist. Gulfstream, in their infinite wisdom, and they make a great aircraft, but when it comes to mitigating and not adding so much of a workload, we're talking about 87 items on a before start checklist.
I would count that as a high pilot workload.
Yes. So that, you can do most of it in a very quick kind of 10 to 15 minutes if you wanted to, but obviously it's a do and then verify or read and do, depending on what operation you're working with. And some of the checks take a little bit longer than others, but because the aircraft was a whole new classification and it was like their bread and butter at the time, of course they wanted to make it such a special thing that they wanted to make sure everything, and as things were added to the airplane over the years and changed, all they would do is just add another line item, add another line item, add another line item. Or if, as we all know, unfortunately, the sad part is that checklists are born and made through blood and tears. And unfortunately, due to some accidents that have happened previously, not necessarily in Gulfstream models, but maybe in a Gulfstream model, they have added more items and more items and more items so that it protects the interests, obviously, of Gulfstream as a whole for making sure they're covering that, but also as the operation itself to make people as safe and double checking the operation efforts to make the flight safe.
So once you're in the air, how is it?
It's actually really easy.
It's easy to fly.
It's super easy to fly. It can be quite heavy when you are fully fueled, because you're talking about a 74,600 pound aircraft at takeoff. And it can be very heavy when you're taking off and flying around, but that's because the hydraulics are working so much to move such a heavy aircraft. But when she's super light, she's nimble, extremely nimble. And it's in a way where it's like you feel the aircraft wanting to take off and lift before your V1 or VR rotate call outs. And because the airplane just wants to fly. It just wants it. And, we obviously got to be safe to make sure that, prior to V1, we're not taking the airplane in the air. But in those realms, you can feel the difference in the weight of the controls as not being nearly as heavy.
Well, let's move back a little bit. Okay. You spoke earlier about the flight attendant, and most aircraft of this size have one. Tell me about her accommodations or his accommodations, if we're not being sexist today, and tell me a little bit about what the flight attendant's perspective of the airplane is. Any complaints, any things that they love about the plane?
It really depends on the operation and the configuration of the airplane, because every operation depending on how old the aircraft is and how much the owner wants to update the aircraft, things can be very well taken care of if it's a really good owner and an operation. But then there are certain operations that will extend MELs and will extend NEFs to the farthest stretchable potential in order to not slam their client with not their client, but their managed aircraft with so much fees, because they're taking care of so many different items on the realm. So they try to kind of extend it out as long as they possibly can, or even try to get it on a 16, 18 month or 36 or 72 month inspection, because it can all be done in that big old inspection.
Right.
But sometimes you just can't have it. But flights and accommodations, it really depends on the aircraft, because some airplanes have a forward galley, some airplanes have a rear galley, some airplanes have a forward bathroom, some do not. Some have a forward crew rest area with a bathroom on the opposite side, and then some have a rear crew rest area or a double-sided galley. It just really depends on when the original owner of the airplane bought the airframe, how they designed it and what they had in mind. Were they only worried about their comfort and their happiness, or were they concerned about were they concerned about their crews also being comfortable, satisfied? And sometimes that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. But
very
overall, true. I mean, the flight attendant, once the 10,000 foot check has happened, they will close there's a door, a sliding like accordion door that will close the main cabin door off, which allows for sound dampening. And then they walk towards the back, and then they'll close off the cockpit so that the passengers have their privacy all the way back to the back of the airplane. If there's a forward bathroom, you'll never see us unless there's an emergency. But if there is a no forward bathroom, we have to do the walk of shame towards the back and obviously have to greet people. But it's actually rather good for us to be able to get up and be able to see how the client is doing, because obviously being the pilot in command, or even just a secondary person in command, reaching out and talking with the client, because sometimes some flight attendants can be rather overtly aggressive, or not necessarily aggressive, excited, or too on their game. And sometimes clients are just like, let me be. Can you just tell her to not check on me for the next 15 minutes? She's checked on me every 5 minutes. That can be the case. It's very rare, because a lot of flight attendants are very well trained, but some that are super new and super eager, they haven't learned yet. And it could be a male or it could be a female, it doesn't matter. But generally in the private world, you're going to see more females than you would see of males as flight attendants.
Absolutely. And completely expect that. I was just teasing a little bit when I said that earlier. There are probably more female pilots than there are male flight attendants, especially in private aviation. So
I would have to agree with that. Yeah,
you know,
I would have
we're
to.
getting there. We're
I
switching
hope
it up
hope
a
it gets
little bit.
more and more. It's always fun flying with a female pilot. So
That's
I
awesome
definitely
to
enjoy
hear. That's
it.
awesome to hear. Tell me a little bit about the passenger comfort in the back. You've talked about the different configurations, and I think that that really influences their experience. But tell me other things that you hear passengers say about the comfort of the cabin.
Well, it depends. If it's the owner who has it, you don't really hear much about the comfort of the airplane because they designed it to their specifications, their happiness. So only if something were to break that is, like a non-essential flight item or a MEL type of item, then they'll be like, well, why is this broken? This shouldn't be broken. Well, sir, we started the airplane and it worked perfectly fine when we started it, but we took off and things have changed, and I apologize for the inconvenience. But when it comes to charter, I've had clients be extremely very happy with the cabin, very, very enjoying all the different amenities that come with it. And then we've also had clients who've shown up that are celebutantes, like socialites, and they happen to be very demanding. And they show up, they never requested a bed, get on the airplane, they complain that a bed is not made, and then the bed is too high, or the inflatable that we were using to make the bed is not pumped up to the right poundage specification, or these seats, one of these seats don't move or doesn't recline as much as they were hoping to. And you don't really see it with the owner so much, but you only really ever see it is with the people who rent the airplane, because they feel as though they're entitled to a certain attitude. And it can be it changes your dynamic on this person that is so revered in public, and you get to see that said person act like a child and kick and scream about certain things. And it's kind of funny to watch that happen. And as my job and with the flight attendant is to mitigate that and make sure that their experience is, of course, the most comfortable, the happiness that they can achieve is of course, is done.
So this is completely off topic, but one of the first airplanes that I ever sold was to someone who said that he had flown just about every celebrity that there was. And he told me, direct quote, and it's not because I'm a country music fan, he told me that country music singers are the best people to fly. Do you have an opinion?
Yes, actually, and I agree with you. I flew a very old country singer. You'll probably know who it is when I say very old, but I'm not going to drop names.
He may live in my town in Austin.
Yeah. And the gentleman was the nicest guy I've ever encountered. Didn't ask for much, didn't bother us at all, didn't complain. And he actually was very happy with our experience and even tipped us a couple $100 at the end of the flight. And all it was just the gentleman was super chill, super calm, very happy. Nothing bothered him. And it was just, let's just do this flight from Maui to Nashville.
Fantastic. I love to hear that. It's so fun because we get to meet so many interesting people in this business. It's always interesting to hear what people are like when their guard is down and the public isn't watching. It's very interesting to see if they're the same or if they're different. I just want to
Most are generally about the same. Yeah, most are generally about the same. And it's quite nice, but every once in a while you get the bad apple of the bunch that likes to really show their true colors.
Oh, well, hopefully it's just because they had a frustrating day, and if you have to fly them again, they're a little better. One more question that I wanted to ask you about is the luggage, because if said debutante or socialite decides to go on a shopping trip in New York, can you bring everything back?
Well, we do have a weight limit in the back. It's 2,000 pounds. Generally, if she's going on a shopping spree, I highly doubt she's going to exceed the 2,000 pound limit, because that's, I'm assuming, going to be closed, most likely, unless she's decided to go on a gold bullion buying spree. Then we're not going to be able to fit anything in the back. We can be able to have it because you have a 65 pound limit per square foot. And if you bring a bunch of gold bullion, I put two places. I could literally put maybe 20 back there, and I've exceeded it almost. You know, I don't know exactly the weight of a gold bullion bar, but that would be entertaining. I've heard of people who used to fly very wealthy individuals out of like the Congo, and they would bring their gold and to other places around the globe. They never really told me where they were going, but they'd be like, yeah, we would have to put the gold in the back and no other luggage. And I'd have to spread the gold bars all over the floor, because if I put all the gold on, like in its carrying case, dropped it on the floor, it would have exceeded the load capacity of that specific area, and you would have got yourself a potential collapse of the floor.
So note to shoppers who are going to be flying on a G4, don't buy gold, spend it.
Yes, exactly. Buy Bitcoin, maybe. I don't know.
Exactly. Perfect. Well, Jordan, thanks so much for all of your insights on the G4. I appreciate you so much, and wish you all the best in your venture with Clay Lacy.
Of course. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was great speaking with you.